Now, the Vice President J.D. Vance is real good at talking to the media, and this is his first interview as the VP.
Margin since the job was created, you had to break
Let's
that
see what he
tie.
has to say.
If the nominee can't unite your party, how's he going to lead 3 million people?
Well, look, I think Pete is a disruptor, and a lot of people don't like that disruption. But Margaret, that disruption is incredibly necessary. If you think about all of those bipartisan massive votes, we have to ask ourselves, what did they get us? They got us a country where we fought many wars over the last 40 years, but haven't won a war about as long as I've been alive. They've got us a military with a major recruitment crisis, a procurement price crisis that's totally dysfunctional, where we buy airplanes for billions and billions of dollars, terrible cost overruns, the delivery dates are always delayed. So we need a big change. Now, admittedly, there are people who don't like that big change, but it is necessary, and it's explicitly what Donald J. Trump ran on.
Also, when people don't like change, honestly, I've been thinking on this, it's no different than somebody who's fat, who's trying to get in shape, who's ate this bloated diet, who's just kind of sedentary on the couch all day. Okay, I'm sorry, you got to change these habits. The change is going to be uncomfortable. We got to change your diet. It's going to be steak. It's going to be eggs. You're going to be taking a multivitamin, some B12, some zinc, some calcium. We're going to give you some NAD plus in there as well. We're going to get you on a workout regimen. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, right? But during that uncomfortability, with heat and pressure, we're going to form a diamond, and you're going to be so much happier afterwards. We just have to get through this growing change. And I feel like no different from somebody getting in shape. And right now, the American government is just fat. It's bloated. It's incompetent. Now we're reading some books again. We're going outside. We're putting on the sweatband. We're going for the jog. We're doing the yoga afterwards. We're
and I think
leaning
part of
out.
the reason why the American people elected him their 47th president.
So the main objective is changing all of that? That it's going to be Pete Hegseth alone?
I'd say the main problem the main thing
Yeah.
that we want Pete Hegseth to do is to
That's
fix
fair.
the problems at the Department of Defense. And unfortunately, there are many. We've gotten into way too many wars that we don't have a plan for winning. We've gotten into way
Grinding
too
is
many
very important. It
misadventures
is.
that we shouldn't have got into in the very first place. And our procurement process, Margaret, is incredibly broken. We're
Those
in
are
an
policy
era.
decisions.
He just said what 80% of Americans probably agree with, that we go to too many wars. They don't really mean anything. And we're really just going over there for oil or resources in the name of democracy.
Well, of course, they're policy decisions, but they're also logistical and implementation decisions. If you look at where we are with the rise of artificial intelligence, with the rise of drone technology and drone warfare, we have to really, top to bottom, change the way that we fund the procurement of weapons, the way that we arm our troops. This is a major period of disruption, and we think Pete.
And honestly, this is very interesting that he says this, because I'm sure during the same day, maybe not at the same time, Trump orders a mass audit with Ukraine to see, hey, what was all that money that we sent you? What did you do with it exactly? I don't know if you can do that, right? Once you give the money over, you gave the money over. It's not like you can say, yo, give me a receipt of everything that you did with it. But maybe once it gets to a certain point, maybe you can.
Pete Hegseth is the guy to lead the job. Now, there's another element to this, Margaret, too, which is we believe that military morale,
What is that,
at
Kev?
least until the election of President Trump, was historically low.
What's that?
You had the Army missing recruitment goals by tens of thousands of soldiers, and already recruitment is starting to pick up because Pete Hegseth is fundamentally a warfighter's leader at the Department of Defense. He is a guy.
Oh, also during my generation, there's probably a small or a large decrease, as JD has pointed out here, people enrolling for the military. It's just because we didn't feel, most Americans did not agree with the idea of going over to another country for natural resources or for, to overthrow a government in the sake of democracy, right? But now we're seeing an increased rise in these rates because we're fighting at the border. We're seeing America do what we deem as patriotic things. So of course people want to sign up and put their 2 cents, and they help out with that. Surprisingly enough, I know it's going to be crazy for y'all, Americans aren't lazy.
Guy who sees not through the perspective of the generals or the
lot
bureaucrats. He looks at
Not
things
all of
through the perspective of the men and women that we send off to fight in our wars.
Both the Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. The Review called her an atrocious nominee who deserves to be defeated. They compared her defense of Edward Snowden.
Of course they do. This lady went out and destroyed Kamala Harris when they first were running for presidency, about how Kamala put so many people in a prison for smoking weed. So she called her out for that because it's like, you're what? You smoked weed and then laughed about it.
Snowden, the fugitive who stole U.S. secrets, to an attorney general who thinks the mob gets a bad rap. Her refusal to accept U.S. intelligence findings that Assad gassed his own people, they said, was like a nominee for OMB director not being able to count. Does any of this give you pause, putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community?
No.
Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the
And
American
ultimately
people
supported
do.
him.
And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
The Senate will
Tulsi
ultimately
Gabbard's.
decide.
Well, the Senate will provide advice and consent, as is its constitutional obligation, but I feel confident that Tulsi Gabbard will ultimately get through. Two things that are important to know about Tulsi. First of all,
It's disappointing because I thought Tulsi was already in. So that makes sense because if she wasn't, she would have already made shit happen. I would love to see this lady in. You want to talk about a definition of an actual badass? Like Laura Croft is an actual person. It's right here in front of us.
she is a career military servant who's had a classification at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades.
Big fan of
She has
Tulsi.
impeccable character, impeccable record of service, and she also is a person who I think is going to bring some trust back to the intelligence services. The bureaucrats at our intelligence services have gotten completely out of control. They've been part of the weaponization of our political system, the weaponization of our justice system. We need to have good intelligence services who keep us safe, but part of that is restoring trust in those services, and we think Tulsi is the right person to do it. That's
She
why the
doesn't trust
president.
those intelligence services.
She recognizes that the bureaucrats have gotten out of control, and we need somebody there who's going to rein them in and return those services to their core mission of identifying information that's going to keep us safe.
You campaign.
I also don't like how this lady, this is the whole reason why the mainstream media has lost its relevancy and has lost its trust. Listen to how this lady is conveying this message. It's like she's speaking for Tulsi Gabbard. It's like, are you sure? When was the last time you spoke to her?
On lowering
Even if you are right, don't speak for somebody else like that.
prices for consumers. We've seen all
You
of
vote for her
these
to be
executive
president? You like
orders.
Tulsi?
Which
I'm a
one
big fan.
lowers prices?
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. More capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our
grocery prices
slate
aren't gonna come
of
down.
executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time, right? The president has been president for all of 5 days. I think that in those 5 days, he's accomplished more than Joe Biden did in 4 years. It's been an incredible breakneck pace of activity. We're going to
This has actually been true. It's been like a whirlwind of all the things that that Trump has done since he stepped foot into office.
work with Congress. We're, of course, going to have more executive orders, and we're going to try the way that you lower prices is that you encourage more capital investment into our country. And you ask specifically, what executive order is going to help lower prices? All of the stuff that we've done on energy, to explore more energy reserves, to develop more energy resources in the United States of America. One of the main drivers of increased prices under the Biden administration is that we had a massive increase in energy prices. Donald Trump has already taken multiple executive actions that are going to lower energy prices, and I do believe that means consumers are going to see lower prices at the pump and at the grocery store, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
JD has such an elegant way of putting that too, and it makes it make sense because when you attack energy, that's going to be a trickle-down effect that makes everything cheaper, but it's going to have to take a few cycles of things to really take notice to the grocery store or to the gas station. And the shitty thing about time is time takes time.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and while we've done a whole lot, we can't undo all of the damage of Joe Biden's presidency in 4 days.
Well, there are a lot of things that contributed to higher energy prices, and there was record oil and gas production.
Yes, Joe Biden did many terrible things to lead to an increase in prices. I agree, Margaret.
No, but all the things you experience at the grocery store are what people touch and feel. That's what
JD Vance
we're
is
talking
logical. Yes, and even though like I don't know if I completely trust JD Vance, right? I don't completely trust any of these guys, right? But I still hold a little bit of reservations with him. He speaks with logic, right? And a lot of what he says is just some common sense stuff.
Bacon on the campaign trail.
Of course.
Election will happen after
of
5
course.
years.
Those things.
In India?
When
Yeah.
do consumers actually get to touch and feel a
2029,
difference
yeah.
in their lives?
Well, Margaret, how does bacon get to the grocery store? It comes on trucks that are fueled by diesel fuel. If the diesel's way too expensive, the bacon's going to become more expensive.
And then where do those bacon come from? From the factory, and you got to keep the lights on. You got to run the machines, like electricity and just energy. If you can make that cheaper across the board, it's going to make everything cheaper.
How do we grow the bacon? Our farmers need energy to produce it. So if we lower energy prices, we are going to see lower prices for
So
consumers.
many people are
and
upset
that
with
is
him
what
with
we're
saying
trying to
grow
fight
the
for.
bacon.
Well, the flurry of executive orders, most of them weren't about the
Any
economy.
business has overhead?
Many of them.
Absolutely.
Many of them were, though, Margaret. We had, I think
You
we've
had-
had
Granted, grow the bacon is kind of funny, but it is true. Like, you get a pig, you buy the food so that it grows. You technically growing the bacon.
We've
a
taken
promise
over,
of tariffs by February 1st.
We've taken over 200 executive actions, some executive orders, other executive actions. Again, this is in less than a week, and a lot of them were focused on the economy, bringing investment into our country and lowering energy prices. We've also focused on safety, restoring public safety, ending weaponization of the Department of Justice. We've done a lot. And I think the president is to be commended for actually coming in and doing something with this incredible mandate the American people gave him. He's not sitting in the Oval Office doing nothing. He's doing the American people's business, and I think they're going to see a lot of good effects from it.
Well, a lot of these announcements have yet to take effect.
Sure.
The president did say he wants to do something with an executive order in relation to federal emergency
anarchy?
response. He said he may reform or eliminate FEMA. Instead of sending emergency responders, he may start to send a percentage of money to states to take care of themselves. But, you know, FEMA has specialized expertise that some of these states just don't have.
That is so not true. FEMA has been such a disaster that the only specialization that they have is how to suck. I mean, I'm sure there's some great people who have worked at FEMA, and I don't want them to ever see this and take that out of context, that they're not doing a good job. But man, are they slow. They can't do anything at a speed that is really acceptable.
Oh,
And
Margaret,
in their arsenal. And
I wish
how
that they-
will states who are
FEMA is like the Federal Emergency and Medical, it's a big relief fund. I can forget exactly what it stands for, but it's a relief fund. So just in case something happens in a state or a natural disaster, they can go in there and theoretically help clean up. But have we seen Flint, Michigan? Have we seen Hawaii? Have we looked at North Carolina? All of these places where FEMA came into, they did more, honestly, they were more in the way than helping. And all states have their own disaster relief programs. Yeah, so send money to that, reinforce it, and send the National Guard or the Coast Guard for extra reinforcements or extra boots on the ground if you need it. That way you get at least trained personnel.
lower income states, the
I bet you
Mississippis, the
can. I bet you can,
Kentuckys,
Jay.
the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help.
Well, the president, to be clear, is not saying we're going to leave anybody behind. He's saying that in the way that we administer these resources, some of which is coming from the federal level, some of which is coming from the state level, we've got to get the bureaucrats out of the way and get the aid to the people who need it most.
But these are
Let's
the
be
first
honest, Margaret,
responders.
you talk about the expertise from FEMA. FEMA in North Carolina, in California, in Florida with some of the hurricanes has often been a disaster. And it's not because we don't have good people at FEMA, it's because bureaucratic red tape and garbage prevents the rapid deployment of resources
But
to the
the
people who need
states
He said the things.
it
are
most.
now going to have to do this themselves.
The
They already have programs.
president is trying to encourage us to reform the way that we deliver emergency response in a way that gets resources
So
to the
don't
people
take
who
him
need it.
literally,
No,
is what you're saying.
This is once more why mainstream media has lost their faith with just the average person. They're coming in here with just a bad faith argument, right? This is supposed to be an interview. This is supposed to be an interview for J.D. Vance in his first interview as being the vice president, and this is the tone. You're telling me that there's no bias? You're telling me that there's no bias in this interview?
We should take the president at his word that FEMA needs desperate reform because
Is
it
J.D.
does.
Vance
Margaret,
the
when I
only
went to
person
North
with common sense
Carolina
left?
as VP elect,
I am glad that he wound up being the vice president, right? Like Tulsi as president, maybe not the best thing. Everyone has their roles, right? And on a team, everyone can't be the quarterback. Everyone has to play their role. And Trump has the ability to get shit done. JD Vance has the ability to really articulate to the American people and to be on media like this and be well articulate and just lay out common sense in a way where it's just where the people in the room are like, finally, somebody's saying what we've all been thinking.
But before we were sworn in, people would talk about how FEMA would get
More hate,
resources,
more fame?
food, medicine, water to a
Haters stand
warehouse,
for having
but then
anger
would have
towards
no
everyone
plan
reaching
to get
success.
it from the warehouse to the people in the mountains who were literally starving and thirsting to death. We can do so much better, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we will.
But they work with the state and local officials.
They often
So
don't work
now
well
it's
enough. And again, that's
going to
not
be on the
because
state
of
and local officials?
the FEMA
Oh my God.
management officials don't work well enough with state and local officials to get resources to the people who need it. We should expect, and this is, I think, one of the fundamental premises of President Trump's leadership, the American people should expect more of their government. When there's a terrible disaster, they should expect food, medicine, and water to get to the people who need it. When there's
Yeah, that's what our taxpaying money is going for. Yeah.
a terrible fire in California, the fire hydrants ought to actually turn on. I am sick of the American people having such low expectations for their government. They should demand more of us because this is the greatest country in the world, and that's what Donald Trump's leadership promises to bring back.
So still count on the federal government, but watch that space. Let me ask you about another area that you campaigned on quite a lot.
We have an inside source that says that a field supervisor says that the higher ups red tape everything, and it's probably just because, Jay, you could probably attest to this. And large corporations, they're just sue happy, right? So FEMA is probably going in there and red taping everything and trying to help, but distancing themselves from any probable cause of doing any type of wrongdoing, right? They're trying to make sure that they can't be put on the case that they did. They're the ones to do any type of wrongdoing in a situation that's already super sensitive. And by doing that and going in there but not really helping full force, it's turned out the way that is exactly where it's at. Is corruption a serious issue in America? Very much so.
And
Now, granted, with this new administration, it seems to be working a lot of that out more so than the 2016 election. Just because Trump has the fucking Avengers surrounding him, but corruption and ineptitude has been the two things that have really held America back these past 4 years.
there was a flurry of activity on, and that has to do with immigration.
Sure.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing
The Catholic
immigration
bishop?
And customs enforcement
I thought we were supposed to separate church and state. Okay.
to enter churches
I don't care what the
and
bishop
to enter
POV of
schools.
this is.
Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address the
I hate that question the way it's worded. Because theoretically, if there's somebody who is a terrorist or convicted for murder or raping or doing something very bad, and they're at the school, presumably a teacher or a janitor or some type of somebody on the payroll, yeah, I don't think I would wait for the day to be done for them to arrest them. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna wait for the school day and just wait outside the classroom. That's insane. Or at a church event, same thing. I'm not gonna wait for service to get over to get the bad guy.
Because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns?
Also, the Catholic, don't you need, is it a little hypocrisy for the Catholic people to be talking about anything with morals? I'm just saying.
Or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people. Donald Trump promised to do that. And I believe the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, if they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open border of Joe Biden.
You personally
Damn.
Let them talk about people like Laken Riley who were brutally murdered. I support us doing law enforcement against violent criminals, whether they're illegal immigrants or anybody else, in a way that keeps us safe. Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murderer in a school, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of
So what's
course.
the point of the question?
You changed
Oh, I love JD.
the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Giving the authority
Yes.
to go into churches and go
Exactly.
into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce
But
the
that
law
also
everywhere
has
to
a
protect
knock-on
Americans.
effect, a chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their kids to school.
I desperately
What is she talking about?
hope it has a chilling
In the
effect on
churches,
illegal
you
immigrants
think the
coming
U.S.
into our
Conference
country.
of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals from
I think the U.S.
law
Conference
enforcement?
of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better.
There are 5 legal challenges already to one of the other immigration actions, the order on birthright citizenship. A federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan, I think you'd agree, has some conservative credentials,
Sure.
paused the order to end birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional. How do you reconcile this challenge to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution?
So I obviously disagree with that judge, and these things, some of them will be litigated. That's the nature of our constitutional system. But here's the basic idea of President Trump's view on this. If you are a lawful permanent resident or a legal immigrant who plans to stay, your children, of course, should become American citizens. But let's say you're the child of an ambassador. You don't become...
But that's not part of it.
Well, that
There's
is
already a carve-out
an
having to do
important
with kids of
principle.
diplomats.
But we're saying that that carve-out should apply to anybody who doesn't plan to stay here. If you come here on vacation and you have a baby in an American hospital, that baby doesn't become an American citizen. If you're an illegal alien and you come here temporarily, hopefully, your child does not become an American citizen by virtue of just having been born on American soil. There's a very basic principle in American immigration law that if you want to become an American citizen and you've done it the right way, and the American people in their collective wisdom have welcomed you into our national community, then you become a citizen. But temporary residents, people who come in here, whether legally or illegally, and don't plan to stay, their children shouldn't become American citizens. I don't know any country that does that or why we would be different.
Well,
That's fair. That's fair.
this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country
This is a
founded
unique
by...
country.
This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers, but just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world. No country says that temporary visitors, their children, will be given complete access to the benefits and blessings of American citizenship. America should actually look out for the interests of our citizens first, and that means, again, if you're here permanently and lawfully, your kid becomes an American citizen. If you're not here permanently, if you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and don't plan to be, why would we make those people's children American citizens permanently?
I want to ask you about
That makes
refugee
sense.
admissions, which were just
That makes
suspended
sense.
by the president. That has nothing to do with the U.S.
I understand that that's going to probably go into the Constitution, and maybe they could figure out some type of middle ground to where you get like the kid gets, I don't know, some year, some like a temporary citizenship, but I could see that being real messy.
border. Refugee screening takes 18 to 24 months to go through. They are heavily vetted. Left literally at the airport this week were thousands of Afghans, some of whom had worked with the United States government and were promised to come here. When you talked to us in August, you said, I don't think we should abandon anybody who's been properly vetted and helped us. Do you stand by that?
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary
Do you stand by
concern
it?
as the Vice President, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people
it's
are
not
vetted.
good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the
Yeah, but what he's saying is the vetting process wasn't good, so they're gonna have to get re-vetted.
guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living
I
here.
don't really
But
care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I
That's based.
think most Americans agree with me.
2
I'm not most Americans, but I agree with them.
weeks ago, you were on Fox News and you said if you protested peacefully on January 6th and had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat
I'm not most Americans. I'm just me.
you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously
She's trying to make
you
everything
shouldn't
trivial. No,
be
I know. That's what I'm
pardoned.
saying.
Did you counsel the
This is
president?
supposed to be a mainstream. This is supposed to be, CNN or CBS, whichever one this is, doing an interview with the vice president of the United States, talking about the changes and how we're going to be building forward and making America great again. But do you see the tone and the way that this is being portrayed? It's just so disingenuous.
President against these blanket
Gross.
pardons for
Ew,
1,500
makes me feel
people,
dirty.
Well, Margaret, I noticed
including those who committed violence.
Margaret, I noticed that you cut off the thing that I said immediately after that. The full quote is that, of course, there are gray areas. And here's the nature of the gray area. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice denied constitutional protections in the prosecutions. There were double standards in how sentences were applied to the J6 protesters versus other groups. What the president said consistently on the campaign is that he was going to look at a case-by-case basis.
This is blanket.
And that's exactly what we did. We looked at 1,600 cases, and the thing that came out of it, Margaret, is that there was a massive denial of due process of liberty, and a lot of people were denied their constitutional rights. The president believes that. I believe that, and I think he made the right decision.
Daniel Rodriguez used an electroshock weapon against a policeman who was dragged out of the defensive line by plunging it into the officer's neck. He was imprisoned, sentenced to 12 years, 7 months. He got a pardon. Ronald Maccabee hit a cop while wearing reinforced brass knuckle gloves, and he held one down on the ground as other rioters assailed the officer for over 20 seconds, causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating, there's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly. And then what did Merrick Garland's Department of Justice do in unjustly prosecuting well over 1,000 Americans in a way that was politically
Is
motivated?
violence like that against a police officer ever justified?
Violence against a police officer is not justified, but that doesn't mean that you should have Merrick Garland's weaponized Department of Justice expose you to incredibly unfair process, to denial of constitutional rights, and frankly, to a double standard that was not applied to many people, including, of course, the Black Lives Matter rioters who killed over 24 people and never had the weight of a weapon.
This is exactly what I was going to bring up. It's not the fact that they did something, they didn't do anything wrong. They did, and pardoning those people maybe not the best idea. Criminals probably should stay in prison, regardless of how much time they have done or have not served. But with these people with other riots who have done other criminals, there's been other crimes that have been done where people have gone in and out of prison, and these people supposedly get an unjust due process. And at the end of the day, you should have a fair and due process, right? That's what you get over here in America.
Weaponized Department of Justice.
I like the way he worded it a lot better than how I just stumbled over that.
Come against them. The pardon power is not just for people who are angels or people who are perfect. And of course, we love our law enforcement and want people to be peaceful with everybody, but especially with our good cops. That's a separate issue from what Merrick Garland's Department of Justice did. We rectified a wrong, and I stand by it.
I'm being told we're out of time, but I want to quickly ask you, the
Please.
richest men in the world were at that Capitol on Inauguration Day, heads of Amazon, Google, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. In August, you told us Google and Facebook are too big. We ought to take the Teddy Roosevelt
you guys saw what I
approach,
saw.
break them up. Don't let them control what people are allowed to say. They've now donated to the Trump inauguration. Are you still going to break up big tech?
So, you know who else was at the inauguration was my mom, and a lot of people who just supported the president and fought every single day to get his election. And
They
to make
gave
it,
$1
and to make
million
it, and to make it
each
possible.
to the inauguration.
Well, there were a lot of people who didn't give $1 million to the inauguration.
pretty good seating.
Who were on that stage, Margaret. They didn't have as good a seating as my mom and a lot of other people who were there to support us.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a beautiful way to completely dodge that question.
But look, we believe fundamentally that big tech does have too much power, and there are two ways they can go about this. They can either respect Americans' constitutional
Never mind.
rights. They can stop engaging in censorship. And if they don't, you can be absolutely sure that Donald Trump's leadership is not going to look too kindly on them.
So they're still on notice.
They're very much on notice.
That I'm glad that I'm not the only one here who's just like, man, this is just so cringe. The way that the way the media handles the Trump administration, it's just gross. It's so disingenuous. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, then please like the video, subscribe, and if you really like it, then share it with some of your friends. My goal here is to spread a positive message while sprinkling my 2 cents on big topics like American, Indian, and world geopolitics, and even small stuff like Twitch drama and online debacles. And if you want to see it live, come join me over on Twitch. Twitch.tv/ActuallyElrod. That's where I'm going to do all my reactions, and after the reactions, that's where we get down a game. And if you're like, hey, I have a video that I want this dude to sprinkle his 2 cents on, then come over on my Discord and let me know and join the community there. And while we're at it, I have to say thank you to everybody who has made that Discord just so poppin'. I never thought I'd have a Discord that's so flowing. It's really cool to see. Shout out to you, Bobby, Omni, Demon, all of you who have been in there who are just super active. Logie, you're the man. Logie is the one who's like modding and helping run the server, so thank you, Logie. Lastly, I challenge you. I have a challenge for you. Make somebody laugh today. We all know there's enough hate and vitriol in the world. If energy is contagious like the flu, then let's spread and get everyone contagious with our positive energy, right? Not negative energy, because there's so much of that. And if we could just be a small little change in someone's day, then you never know. Maybe that's the thing that starts shifting this world to a happier, healthier, just better place. And with all of that said and done, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.